Hello, team, and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is Ukraine War Update Extra video, giving you the extra nuggets and tidbits to get your teeth into to give you a greater understanding of the war in Ukraine. Sometimes my brain is just mush, and I don't even know what video I'm doing. I'm going to start off with a few little bits and pieces before getting to one of those really long threads looking at an analysis of the counteroffensive that might potentially be taking place in Zaporizhia, almost certainly to some point in Zaporizhia. There's a big long bunch of threads that Chris O'Wiki has been translating, and I'm finding them very interesting. So I'll do the second one today, but that'll be at the end. Just going to go first of all to general comment about my mapping. I am, as you know, just a very high quality annotator of maps. And when you see my talk about what I think the counteroffensive will look like in Zaporizhia, you will know my maps look something like this. Ukraine will come down here to some degree and there as well. So that is basically what the extent of my mapping does. And then I might, go, yeah, so this area will be controlled by the Ukrainians, and then eventually they'll do this and that. But basically, it looks something like that. The two lines aren't necessarily like exactly where the troops are going to go, but they just indicate that the land bridge is going to be cut. Well, anyway, I'm just going to refer you to this massive plagiarist, Anders Puck Nielsen, absolutely fabulous YouTube channel. He's done a really good How to War Going early May 2023 video. I just want to point you towards this.
It's the opportunities that might show up in other places. I think the most likely place for a first push will be in the south. And this is actually not some brilliant thing that I figured out. It's what almost
It's stolen off me.
Everybody says, because it's pretty obvious. If Ukraine can break the Russian occupied area into two, then that can set a whole new direction for the war, because then Ukraine can cut off the supplies to the Russians in Kherson and in Crimea. Like they would not be able to get supplies.
I mean, that's copyrighted. He can't do that. It's just, oh my god,
through the land corridor anymore. And
no, I'm being silly, obviously. No, go and watch his channel. Absolutely amazing. Anyway, on to other things. Actually, just before I do go on, I do want to mention this because this comes up routinely, and it's to do with YouTube. So a lot of people say, why have you deleted my comments? I had someone that used to be a member, and then he's gone over to my philosophical channel, and we disagree on a few things, but he's like, I can't believe it's disgusting that you've deleted my comments. I haven't deleted your comments. I don't delete comments. The only comments I delete are outright spam. I just had to delete a load of some Telegram channel that got hold of my avatar and has been spamming everyone's comments. So I'm going deleting them and blocking them from the channel and that kind of stuff. But I don't delete the Russian bots. I've deleted a couple of bots who were making outright accusations at me, like calling me a malicious liar and stuff like this. I'm like, oh, you need to substantiate that, or you can do one. No, substantiate that, or you do one. You haven't substantiated that, you're off. That kind of stuff. Like, if you're going to come here and just outright insult me, that's not good enough. You need to just come here with some receipts and that we can talk about stuff. But if we disagree, that's fine. You'll be able to post what you like, as long as it's, within the bounds of being reasonable in terms of like decorum. But so I don't delete your posts. So if you say all your comments, if you come to me and say, why have you deleted my comments, in a nice way, like Pierre Dupont earlier on said, why have you deleted my comment? Why have you done that? And I'm like, I don't do that. But what happens is YouTube have got a really shaky comment algorithm, and I don't understand it, and no one seems to understand it very well. What they will delete, just to let you know, in case you don't know, if you include any links, any URLs, any internet links in your comments that are not other YouTube videos, so they allow that, but any other link they will get rid of. It might not disappear straight away, but within a couple of minutes, that post is generally gone. So any links included in comments will be deleted by YouTube, and then they have some kind of weird algorithm where they randomly delete stuff. They'll delete some of my comments every now and again, and I don't know why. I have no idea, and it's really frustrating because sometimes you put a load of effort into some comments and then suddenly it's gone. and you're trying to get a conversation going. You're trying to, interact with other people, and so I cannot excuse YouTube. It is not me. I promise. Right. This I found quite poignant because, well, this is a video, and it's a 2-minute video of people pulling down Russian. Oh, goodness. Sorry, that was on mute. I pressed play and it turned off the mute. Why would it do that? And then my mouse just went nuts. So anyway, it's YouTube having a go at me or something. No, it's Twitter, evidently. So this is a 2-minute video of many places around, and you can see the dating there. It's 2014. Many places around, predominantly, Europe, maybe the Caucasus, pulling down old Soviet statues. And it's this idea that, and this has happened a lot since the outbreak of this iteration of the war in April last year, February last year. And the idea is like, Russia, we're doing so well, isn't this a great idea? And actually, this is a huge representation that yes, over the last decade, that Russia have lost a lot of the soft power when you have people actually not rewriting history, but they're working out who they should be glorifying. Statues are really important, and I won't get onto the whole statues debate. I've written an article on that if you want. But if you're going to glorify, so statues are glorification of people, and you can pull. You don't have to, just because the statue's been erected, you don't have to keep it up. It doesn't, like, if I don't like that, and all of society don't like what that represents and who that person is, then tear it down or remove it nicely and recycle it or whatever. Like, you don't have to continue glorifying that which was previously glorified. It's a general point here. Well, actually, that's not really the point. The point here is, and then look at what's happening to Russian statues routinely over quite a period of time and over quite a large area of geography. Yes, there'll be a lot, as you can see here, in sort of these will be places in Ukraine largely, but we've seen this in the Baltic states, and we've seen this in other places around the region. And I just think that Russia's decision to invade Ukraine was, I've said before, it's one of the worst decisions ever. But it will have all sorts of other ramifications, and one of them is not only the loss of their hard power, like tanks and aircraft, and loss of personnel, humans, but they've had people fleeing to avoid mobilization. So you're having a brain drain, but you're having a loss of soft power and influence and cultural kind of influence around the world. And I think that can be summed up by lots of statues being pulled down. I talked about this. I mentioned it briefly. Kherson has announced a curfew, and I find that fascinating because, I mean, is it a psyops? Is it like, we're having curfew here? Why would you have a curfew? Well, because a counterattack might be happening. So the Russians will know there's a curfew is being announced. Then do they think, oh, there might be a counterattack there, or it's to fake them into thinking there's a counterattack, or it's a triple bluff, double bluff, triple bluff? You start like, and this is entirely what I guess the intentions will be, is that they may well be attacking from Kherson, but you don't know whether they will or won't, because you're so confused as to whether it's a bluff, double bluff, triple bluff, that you end up thinking, well, I'm really not sure what's actually going on. Right, just quickly going to refer you to a lovely excerpt here of Stephen Kotkin, who, with the Foreign Affairs channel here, he has just a really good interview about. I mean, he's got a great knowledge of Russia and the surrounding areas. Is he a historian? I'm fairly sure Stephen Kotkin is a historian. Anyway, check out this part, and this is just. He's already talked about how we might be forgiven for thinking, maybe because it's been perpetuated, or maybe not forgiven for thinking. Maybe that's his point, that actually we shouldn't have thought that the West is in decline, that our institutions are less powerful, that we aren't unified, and in fact, you look at 2014 and not doing enough in about Crimea. You look at, I don't know, leaving the Kurds, hang them to dry when when the US pulled out troops from around Syria, when they're pulling out from Afghanistan. People and China and Russia were giving out their narrative and saying, the hegemony of the West is those days are gone. Is a new hegemony. It might be understandable that you might think, yeah, goodness me, right? This is a really multipolar world, and perhaps, I'm not really sure. But actually, he's saying that no, really, the war has shown that the West does have a backbone, and well, anyway, I'll let him take over.
So that's the problem for them. And I understood this honestly beforehand, that the West was really powerful. I gave lectures in Vienna several years ago about the West as a voluntary sphere of influence and how the West had this power. But I made a mistake.
What did you see that others missed?
I study history, right? And so people talk about a multipolar world. And I say, okay, name to me the important international institutions where someone from South Africa, India, or Nigeria is the dominant decision maker. Tell me which institutions you're talking about. Would that be the IMF? Would that be the World Bank? Would that be the EU and NATO? Would that be the Five Eyes? Would that be the Federal Reserve, which is not even a multinational institution, but is a domestic institution, but it's the most powerful multinational institution in the world, including for the Europeans? And so if you looked at it soberly, empirically, historically, you couldn't fall for this Chinese and Russian propaganda that we ourselves were mouthing. But I made a big mistake. It's very necessary, Dan, to be humble. Humility is the hardest and most important trait of anybody who, purports to have some expertise in some area. And I made a really big mistake. I didn't understand how the West could snap back so quickly and rediscover this power that it had. I thought that maybe Putin would get away with murder again. Not because the West was what he thought it was, but because the West wouldn't respond to show the teeth, to show the power, to show the unity, to show the values that gave it this power. And so I underestimated the ability of the West in a short period of time to rediscover and reassert itself. And I'm so happy to be wrong about that.
So if we'd been having this conversation on February 22nd before the invasion, you would have shared a view of what would transpire that Putin presumably had at that time.
I was afraid that we would not respond properly to Russia's challenge in Ukraine. I understood that Ukrainians would resist. And that's because we all watched in real time in 2004-05 and in 2013-14. We watched them overthrow domestic tyrants. And we watched them risk their lives, and we watched some of them lose their lives in what was originally called the Orange Revolution and then the Maidan of 2013-14, when Yanukovych was chased from the country and then Putin seized Crimea not long thereafter. We all watched that. And so we understood that the pathologies of the Ukrainian political system aside, that the society was really, really strong and that there was courage there and ingenuity. We didn't know necessarily the depth of NATO training of the rebuilt Ukrainian army. I think that's something that only people in the know on the inside fully understood that. I certainly didn't fully understand that, but I understood the will to resist, take risks, put their lives on the line. And I was afraid the West wouldn't respond properly to that. Let's remember the Biden administration, which had the disastrous exit from Afghanistan. We can argue whether it was a good idea or a bad idea to exit from Afghanistan, but I don't think you can argue that the exit as executed was well done. Trump started the exit from Afghanistan. The original date was May. The Biden administration changed it to September 11th, thinking it was going to reap all this political capital. Instead, it reaped the whirlwind, as we know. It was the same plan for Ukraine. It was a cut and run. And it wasn't just the U.S., but the embassies all fled from Kiev. I mean, what was that about?
This is when what it's just about to say here just made me really think, maybe think about the importance of Zelensky, actually. And it's been talked about ad infinitum, but actually, sometimes you forget how important it was, obviously, that he stayed.
And then the U.S. offered Zelensky the opportunity to flee the country. Ghani fled by himself from Afghanistan, but we were offering him the logistics to get out, and he declined. Zelensky declined, but we could have had, if Zelensky had made the mistake of agreeing to the Biden administration offer to get out, we could have had something similar in Ukraine that we had in Afghanistan, only maybe even worse.
Just imagine if Zelensky had actually gone, how different this would have been. I don't think. I think Ukraine would have been overrun had that one human being not decided to stay there. I don't know for sure, actually, but you could imagine it sort of crumbling without a figurehead being there who would then be there to represent to the Ukrainian people a strength, a resistance. And it would have been really easy. Imagine yourself like that self-preservation. Oh, the US are offering me a way out of here, a comfortable way out of here. Yeah, I'll take that because the Russians are coming. No, I'm going to stay here. And from that point onwards, one was able to build, the world were able to coalesce around Zelensky and be able to help him there. And that desperation of him being there with the encroaching Russians gave the West a sense of, we need to protect him. We need to protect what he's standing for. Yeah.
But we didn't. Zelensky showed the kind of courage to risk his own life, as well as all the ingenuity that we've been seeing to stay there and to say, we're going to stay here and we're going to fight. And the Biden administration was good enough, smart enough to latch on to that and slowly, gradually escalate our support for Ukrainian resistance. The Europeans were ahead of us at the beginning of that process when Zelensky turned them. And the Biden administration has been too slow and too gradual, but nonetheless has done the right thing, which is to say, support Ukraine's self-defense with everything we can, and rally in a leadership role the NATO alliance to be deeply involved in that. And the EU has stepped up to the plate as well. So I kudos to the US, the Biden administration. Yeah, you can whinge about ATACMS and jets, right? But, and I've said this before in the comments, I've said this previously in videos, actually, a long time ago. Those decisions won't be Biden's. So when you have people going, oh, I can't believe Biden hasn't given ATACMS, like, that won't be coming from him. He's not an expert on ATACMS, right? That'll be coming from Milley and Austin and probably other people as well, just saying, no, we really can't do that. It's not going to put the US military in the right strategic position. Biden's not the expert in those kind of decisions. He doesn't know that. He will be parroting. I mean, that sometimes you can override things if you have that political will, if it's obvious, but he'll be like, okay, that will screw us over, so we need to give something else then that's going to help them in a way that would, but we can't give that. When it comes to jets, again, there will be things that are probably going on under the bonnet that we don't know about. But when it comes to not giving jets, that will be the advice that he's being given. But so I think that's really important to know. We can often blame governments on the figurehead of the country, but in certain contexts, that figurehead won't really have the expertise to make those. Like Biden's going doddering around doing like all sorts of stuff to do with domestic politics and this and that. And that. We are the ones sitting watching. I said this the other week. We're the ones sitting watching 3 hours of Ukraine stuff a day. He's not doing that. Like he's back home drinking tea by 4:30. Like we know what Ukraine needs to the point that he won't. So he has to know about lots of things. So when you are a leader, you delegate, right? And people come to you and say, right, you've got a meeting here that's going on here. Here are your options. This is what you need to say. I've written a speech for you. There you go. Okay, you go and deliver that speech. Like it was a lot. God, I remember when I was much younger. It's like, what?
leaders don't write their own speeches. No, they don't. Of course they don't. You have your speechwriters. So, even those words aren't his. So he is at the beck and call of all the people around him. And when it comes to things like very particular military decisions, he won't be making those. He may be able to push back. There may be some wriggle room, but essentially that expertise is not his. But where America have been really, really strong is on, and I keep saying this, on influencing other countries and other entities, like, for example, NATO. And I talked recently about Egypt changing their mind on something. Turkey and Serbia and Hungary have changed their rhetoric on certain things. And you can bet 100% that the US administration is in there, along with the EU and others, going, yeah, I think you need to be saying this, and if you don't, we won't give you this and that. So there's the US are supremely powerful, right? They are the hegemony, the global hegemony. So they are the supreme power of the world, and that gives them a lot of chips to do a lot of bargaining with, and I think that's what is being pretty effective.
Didn't understand that all of that could happen so quickly. It was a gift from the Ukrainians. It was a gift, their courage, their ingenuity. It was a gift maybe we didn't deserve, but they delivered it to us at very high cost, extremely high cost, which is still going on as we speak. And fortunately, we accepted that gift and we did respond, and the West did snap back. And so now the issue is sustaining that self-rediscovery of the West, thanks to the Ukrainians, that gift that we got.
Okay, really, really interesting there. And also all that talk about, and there was talk earlier from the point that I played the video, the idea that all the main institutions around the world are still Western institutions. Now you can talk about problems with that, perhaps, etc., etc. But geopolitically speaking, I guess the organizations that are unified around the US and the EU still have those power structures in a way that, say, BRICS or other accumulations of countries, organizations of countries involving Russia and China don't have. They don't have these international organizations that are in positions of power, globally speaking. And so actually the West still does have this power, and if it can use it to good moral effect, then that is brilliant. And I see that I see and hope that is what is happening with Ukraine. Anyway, let's move on now to the counteroffensive from Chris Owicki's translated thread. So in my last extra video, we were looking at the 7 aspects of the offensive, the battlefield, opposing forces, and attack preparation. That's where we got up to. And now we're going to talk about the beginning of the breakthrough onwards. So we're going to go to the second part. There's a very long thread, and there'll be lots of place names that I'll be mentioning today. So I'll grab my map, because actually I cannot zoom any further into this war mapper map. It doesn't let me. It stops here. The 3 main areas, though, if you're going to look at this map for the second, Vasilivka, Orikhiv, and Hyliopolei, coming down to Polohi. So if we go to my map, that is going to be Vasilivka down here, just south of Kamyanska, just there. Orikhiv coming down through Nestoryanka and Myrna through down to Tokmak here. And then we've got Hyliopolei, which is up here. And below that, you've got Polohi. So if we set set the roads there, then you can see how these places are going to be super important. Vasilivka down through this route to Melitopol, Orikhiv through this route through Tokmak to Melitopol, and then Hyliopolei can come down through Polohi, maybe branch out in that direction, or itself come through Tokmak, or goes kind of cross country further down there. So that's going to be the area we are talking about. Okay, let's get to it. So part 4, the beginning of the breakthrough. It is most advantageous to start the breakthrough in 3 to 4 directions at once, and on each also in several separate areas, to then develop these that will go well. And by the way, he's already established why he thinks, and I haven't shared that thread with you, why he thinks this is the most preferable of the offensive areas. I think he on another thread he talked about whether here or down to Mariupol, but was certainly concentrating on the south. How to choose a place for the breakthrough. This is influenced by two factors: the weakness of the enemy defenses and tactical expediency. They often conflict with each other. After all important targets are well covered, and the weak defense is there from which you will not be able to get out on your own. So there has to be a compromise. The Russian army is surely building the densest defenses in the major population centers. So it is a good thing none of these are directly on the front lines. But in any case, it is not a good idea to break through via villages and hamlets, getting into street battles. Really, as I've talked to you many times before, urban warfare is expensive in terms of attrition of your own forces. You need a really large force ratio to the defenders, and this is a problem with Bakhmut, is the Russians didn't have that large force ratio. There was something approaching parity, and the defenders will have the advantage for all the reasons I explained in a previous post. And that has meant that Bakhmut has been incredibly attritional for the Russians. The Ukrainians are going to do an offensive. They will want to steer away from directly attacking towns, large towns, and cities. They want to encircle settlements rather than fight through them. So here he says, I think the AFU will try to break through immediately along the main roads, bypassing and isolating the fortifications in the settlements. The main forces can be thrown into the attack in the direction of Novoprokopivka, Solodka, Balka, Tokmak to cut the attack zones into two parts from the beginning. Now, this is just to let you know that his map that he uses here is broadly in, well, it's got a bit of mix of everything. It seems to be at some points in Ukrainian or Russian, and at other points in English sort of transliteration. So it does make it a little bit confusing. So he's talking about the main forces can be thrown into the attack in the direction of Novoprokopivka to Solodka, Balka, Tokmak. So that is going to be in this central area. An interesting option is a breakthrough through Nestoryanka and Myrna to Tavria and Novohorivka to reach the highway to Tokmak and on to Molochansk in the southeast. So that is Nestoryanka there to Myrna. So if we go back to my map, just to give you a kind of understanding there, we zoom in a little bit to the Orikhiv area. And then we have Nestoryanka to Myrna to Norihivka there, and coming down to that road that feeds then into Tokmak. Otherwise, you've got Orikhiv down to Roberterne, and this is Novoprokopivka he's talking about. So these different options open. We return to what he's claiming. To Tokmak and then on to Molochansk in the southeast. If we can't get through Vasilivka, an attack on Novohorivka will open the road to the E105 highway as well. But here's the E105 highway there coming down, and that takes you to Melitopol. That's going to be an important road to try and use, because obviously you can move your troops far more quickly than going across country, although this is flat land here, as we talked about previously. So that's Molochansk there. So Tokmak to Molochansk is what it's talking about, coming through Nestoryanka, Myrna, Novohorivka, and then down here. Yes, let's continue. Another direction will be the road southwest of Polohi. It is like a back door. It allows us to get close to the rear of the dense chain of settlements from Novokarivka to Kinsky Rodzdory, potentially a very interesting direction that could derail the Russian defenses, which is to say coming here and then maybe double backing on yourself. So just on my map, that would be coming down maybe to Polohi through there, and then maybe down there, or coming in behind it. Lots of different options you have. For example, a breakthrough here would allow the Ukrainians to go to Berdyansk if the attack on the left flank will choke. Naturally, a direct attack on Polohi with a breakthrough near Drozhnyanka is also possible. there would be an offensive from two sides at once. So this is coming down from the north as well as coming over here from towards Orikhiv. So again, on my map, that is to say, if you're going to take Polohy, you could come down through Drozhyanka, where they have been recently having reconnaissance in force activity there, as well as in Robertoni as well. So coming from Polohy from two angles. And then you could even, as they say, come down to Berdyansk from there. So there are lots of options open. Obviously, a breakthrough will be required near Kamyanska. This is over near the reservoir where you've got Vasilivka just here. With an offensive on Vasilivka, I suspect that this will be the most difficult. The Russian troops can concentrate large forces here in a narrow area. Vasilivka's importance is obvious, so Putin's units will fight. And you can obviously use the water here as a kind of form of defense. So it means that the Ukrainians won't be able to flank around here, so you can actually pour quite a lot of resources into defending this area that then stops these roads being utilized. So actually it's quite a key, this is what he's talking about, it's quite a key position because of all these roads that come out from Vasilivka. If you can hold that, then you arguably stop these roads, at least to the south. You may be able to interdict this road from the north. Okay, now let's come down to earth and think about what the AFU can do to break through the defense. They will face obstacles such as mines, trenches and fortified positions, artillery fire, physical obstacles like pyramids, ditches, rivers and ravines, and airstrikes. Very simplistically, I would depict a scheme of maximum Russian defense roughly as follows. So my translation skills aren't that good here. In fact, let's do a bit of a translation using Google Image and see what we can learn from this. So translate. That is to say, minefield here, anti-tank ditch, 2 to 3 rows of concrete pyramids, minefield, and first line of trenches, often the only line of trenches, but not always. So that's what that means. And then he goes on to look at simplifying that. So, but to keep in mind that on the front lines, it is somewhat simplified to this view, which is going to be minefields and then the first line of trenches, and often the only one. So possible tactics may be as follows. Before the attack, artillery shells the defense line. The goal is to destroy physical fortifications like pyramids, complicate the position of the defenders of the first line in the trenches, and possibly suppress some of the firing points. Then, early in the morning, the bomb squad and anti-personnel drones should operate simultaneously. The UAVs distract the enemy, causing light damage, but mostly forcing them to press into the ground and doing detailed reconnaissance at the same time. So before you try and get across the minefields and maybe across the Dragon's Teeth and whatnot, you need to be suppressing the enemy in the trench. So you can do that by artillery and then the use of drones. If you do that consistently and bombs and whatnot, then these guys are having to be protecting themselves. They are suppressed, and then you can do some mine clearance. For example, by identifying ATGMs, so anti-tank guided missiles, buried tanks, so people with cornets or Konkurs or the ATGMs that the Russians use, buried tanks and revetments acting as firing points, forward depots and supply roads, like mortars and anything else important. Meanwhile, sappers quickly make gaps in the first line of minefields. The leading tanks go through the breaches of the minefields, covering the following BMPs and wheeled armored vehicles with their armor. It is possible that tanks with mine flails go straight ahead, slower but more reliable, which is to say that this kind of activity, it will be slow. They'll probably throw out mine clearing explosives and blow a path through. Because remember, these will be difficult and challenging to negotiate. But once you've got that single break somewhere, then you can get in behind and cause merry havoc. So it's about getting that initial break, and they'll be trying this all along different places. And as soon as you get in behind, everything becomes a lot more simple, a lot simpler, because you can just go along the entire lines then from behind. The goal is to cut through the first line as quickly as possible, even if some equipment is lost. Having created a gap, the infantry group, supported by some tanks, should start flanking the first line of trenches to widen the breakthrough area and the leading units advance. Driving such an attack, the Ukrainians will lose some equipment, mostly to mines, and as a result of APC and RPG shots from the trenches, but tanks are unlikely to be destroyed, only damaged and then repaired. The use of mobile artillery, 122 self-propelled artillery, mortars, and 105 light cannons that can work as quickly as possible on demand by advancing infantry will be important. Russian artillery and MLRS fire can be a serious problem. It is important to deprive it of its strength while preparing for an attack. Long-range batteries such as HIMARS Caesars and Panzerhaubitze 2000s should be allocated for counter-battery fire. Of course, these will have longer range than the Russian artillery, and so there should be a competitive advantage there. I don't think aviation would play a significant role in the breakout phase unless the Ukrainian columns moving out to attack would come under attack. It is important to cover them. Russian Su-25s would fire unguided rockets over the area, and Su-34s would drop bombs, but their accuracy would be very poor, and they would not fly close to the front. For the Ukrainian Air Force, the priority targets will be artillery batteries that open fire on the advancing troops, but don't expect big results here either. Several air battles will probably ensue. In fact, I was told that helicopters would be the most important component of the counteroffensive rather than the fixed-wing aircraft. Helicopters would be much more effective, indeed, he says here. Evacuation of the wounded, delivery of supplies and advanced teams, minor equipment such as communication systems will all be handled by Mi-8s, Mi-17s and Mi-24s. Another option, though, unlikely to be the main one, is a gradual attrition of the defences, regular bombardment, exhaustion with drones and gradual removal of mines, perhaps even at night, although it's extremely difficult, on some forgotten section of the front. The aim would be to maximally weaken the defences there so that small assault groups could try to occupy the first strip of trenches, and then under the cover of these forces conduct a full-fledged mine clearance and breakthrough with heavy equipment. Judging by videos from the front, the lines of the Russian trenches are not overcrowded. There are often only 3 to 4 soldiers per 100 meters of trench, so attritional tactics might work given the mess in Russian units and poor control of the situation. So now moving on to key points, part 5, key points. I call key points the population centers whose control will play an important role in the Ukrainian counterattack. Roughly speaking, if the Ukrainian army liberates and occupies all the following settlements and villages, the offensive will succeed. So he's laying out that Polohy, Vasilivka, and then just south west of Tokmak, which is Molochansk, and then places going on to Melitopol. So if we look on my map, that's going to be Polohy and Tarasivka here, and then moving on, we've got Molochansk. He doesn't actually talk about Tokmak, and he explains a little bit later. Vasilivka, and then ones further down south like Mikhailivka here, and some of these coming into Melitopol. You've got like a V of them: Topinya, Myrna, Semenivka, and then Novobodanivka, Fedorivka, down in this direction. You got this, as I say, this quite acute V. Right, so let's see what he has to say. I did not include Tokmak. All right, here we go. And Melitopol. It's too obvious that they are key. Moreover, even some of their districts and parts may be key. But here we are talking about another level of analysis. We will deal with that when the airview starts fighting for these cities. So I've divided the key points by direction. First, the western flank, Vasilivka, Mikhailivka, and Vesely. Matvivka can also be listed there. So if we look on my map, that is just over to this direction. Sorry, gone too far. So you've got Vasilivka, Mikhailivka there, and Matvivka there. Vesely is down over here as well, which is quite a lot to the southwest, but might be important for a kind of flanking move of Melitopol. So he says that all of these points open the road to the south and then the east, the highway T0818 and T0811. Highways are going to be super important. These sort of roads, one from Vasily in there, this one going north to south, and then when you get down to Melitopol, the one going east-west. So they're going to be very important for logistics and for quick movement. The Ukrainians want to be quick. They want to have momentum. They want speed is going to be important for getting the Russians to panic, to rout, and to think, oh my goodness, they could be here soon, and etc., etc. Vasilivka, with the nearby Piderny, is the most important settlement that opens the road to Melitopol. It will have to be liberated without any doubts. Probably it is here that the heaviest battles of the first phase of the breakthrough of the AFU will be launched. Next is Mikhailivka. The fortification map shows, and this is Brady Afric's fortification map, shows that Russian troops have created a large stronghold there. It covers the left flank of the front and the logistics of that flank. This includes the main local highway, the E105. So that is to say that if the Ukrainians are hoping to come down here through Vasilivka, it's really important that they obviously take Vasilivka for all the reasons we already mentioned, to do with the sort of network of roads. But Mikhailivka is super important as well, which, as you can see, it connects a bunch of roads there. And you've got the main highway going north-south, which then gets you through to Mativka. So, yeah, really super important. It is unlikely to be possible to bypass Mikhailivka. The Ukrainians will have to drive the Russian army out of there. Vasily may become the westernmost boundary, and I mentioned that was just over there. So that is the westernmost boundary, maybe, of this counteroffensive coming down from Zaporizhia. Westernmost boundary of the offensive line, in addition, from there opens another road to Melitopol, and this is not the only a path for the attackers, but also a route for supply trucks. Now, immediately jump to the eastern flank of the attack. The key points here are Polohy and Tarasivka, together with the accompanying settlements. The entire area is very densely built up, and the Russian army is probably planning to hang in there. So there's a lot more density of settlements in this area, Polohy, Tarasivka, so on and so forth, over to Kinsky, Rozdory, and if you wanted to come down through towards Berdyansk. Then it is possible to move on Smirnova or Chernihivka, and even onto Berdyansk, as I just said, and those are between Berdyansk and Polohy. The liberation, or to simulate this attack, the liberation of Polohy will be an important result of the first phase of the offensive. More on that below. Now onto the centre. I will not consider the front line points. It is clear that it is important to pass by or through them, but further, Vinohradne and Molochansk could play a key role. Why? They cover Tokmak from the rear, and there is a bridge over the Lomochna River. So he's talking about these two settlements either side of the river there, southwest of Tokmak. So we come onto my map. That is Tokmak here, and then we've got Molochansk there and Vinohradne there. So talking about this in the rear of Tokmak, these being important. So you could bypass Tokmak. Tokmak is surrounded by defensive fortifications that have been built. As you can see from there, that is what that entails, and Brady Afric's map shows that very clearly too. If these settlements are liberated, Russian troops would be left with only one road, the R37, that's this one, and via Molochansk. Ukrainian units can pass Tokmak directly to the south all the way to Melitopol along the highway beside the river. So that you can bypass Tokmak and you can cut it off and leave it, and maybe the offensive guard, the people that sort of deal with trying to secure Tokmak. Novobodanivka to Svitlodarnytske and Tapinya form a triangle deep in the offensive strip. I think the Russian army will try to defend these points. Novobodanivka covers the E105 highway. Svitlodarnytske covers numerous crossings across the Molochna River. And this is that V I was talking to you about coming down into Melitopol. I did mention there was going to be lots of place names. So Melitopol, you've got this V of roads, Tapinya, here, Novobodanivka, and some of these places are around there. So that's what he's talking about. So Svitlodarnytske, or whatever it is there. So you've got this V of settlements. and the river to negotiate as well. And they will be needed at least to connect the advancing troops to one and the other side of the river. And finally, Terpinia is a place where the two highways converge. And that is there as the highways start getting closer and closer. So that's the convergence of the roads somewhere in that area. I mean, it's a bit difficult when it's all in Cyrillic writing, but you get the point. The village, which can be both the last line of defense of the Russian army in Melitopol and the base for the attack on the city by the Ukrainians. As for Melitopol, I would take a closer look at another small point, Sadova. It not only covers the city from the south, rather the point is that by occupying Sadova, the Ukrainians will complete its breakthrough to the sea, and the Russian front will be cut into two parts. So this is to say that just to the south, as you can see there, we have Sadova, just to the south of Melitopol. And once you're around there, really it's hop, skip, and a jump to the sea. So again, it's going to possibly be a case of, encircling some of these places, and hoping that the Russians would just kind of give up and shift off, and then move on, possibly leaving offensive guards to do this stuff behind the lines. If the attack takes the shortest route, then the liberation of Sadova will be the signal that everything's over. Now the Russian left bank grouping can only retreat to Crimea, and that's a left bank as the Russians are looking at it. So I'll go through the next thread to that tomorrow in tomorrow's piece, but hopefully you get a sense of some of the geography that we will be talking about, I'm sure, quite a lot over the next month or so. These are names that I'm pretty sure we get to know fairly well. So it's a good dip into the geography and the tactics that might be involved in this operation, or the operational strategy, if you like, in taking particular directions, taking certain key points, and how they might negotiate the defenses that have been put in place. Anyway, I really appreciate you hanging out today, as ever. Please like, subscribe, and share. Hit the bell, subscribe. I don't know, notifications, things, words that are associated with the YouTube. Do all of those things. You can check out my new book that is out today. That's just a follow on spam from earlier. It's the 4th. May the 4th be with you. It's May the 4th, so that's why we released it today. Aliens and Religion, Where Two Worlds Collide. It is philosophical. There is some science in there. There's some psychology in there, actually. Cognitive dissonance reduction plays a major part, which I've talked to you about plenty of times. So, a whole load of stuff to do with what would happen. Would religion be threatened if we discovered intelligent alien life out there? Not just as if it came to us and was, oh, hello, but actually if we got signals of it, some kind of indication that it exists out there. How would that affect the world's major religions? How would it affect non-religious people? What would it? Is it challenging? That kind of stuff. So that's what we talk about. I'm going to be doing loads of live streams. I'm doing one tonight, actually, a live stream on some channel somewhere with Dr. Aaron Adair, who's my co-author, and we're pretty excited about that. So check that out. I might put a link to that on the community tab, but it depends. I'm going to be super busy today. Anyway, take care. Speak to you tomorrow.